Finance Group in the European Parliament has held a historic decision taken by the European Union Court of Justice to definitely cancel two trade agreements concluded between Morocco and the EU. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. Joining me today, my colleague Essia Bakar. Hi Essia.
Hi Mariam.
The President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of the National Defense, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired a meeting of the Council of Ministers devoted to the Finance Bill for 2025 and to presentations relating to several sectors. Regarding the Finance Bill for 2025, the President of the Republic welcomed the financial model of the Finance Bill, which does not provide for any tax increases affecting the daily lives of citizens. The President of the Republic has ordered the creation of the National Agency for the Balance of the State Budget, Forecasting and Planning in order to rigorously monitor sub-budgets and budget allotted to various sectors. He also ordered a substantial increase in the amount of the tourist allowance so that citizens travelling abroad can benefit each year, as well as the student scholarship at home and abroad. Regarding the health situation relating to the epidemic of diphtheria and malaria in the border regions of the extreme south of the country, the President of the Republic has ordered rigorous monitoring of the health situation in the border provinces of the extreme south, which continues to register cases. Regarding the progress achieved as part of the digitalization process, President Tebboune stressed the importance of paying extreme attention to cybersecurity and to be vigilant when acquiring equipment and materials, considering its close link with national security. The President ordered the government to take all measures in coordination with the Ministry of the National Defense, while calling on Algerian expertise, particularly from universities, affirming that the digitization project is an integral part of the foundations of the triumphant Algeria. With regard to the conditions and procedures for approving, operating and monitoring private education and teaching establishments, the President of the Republic stressed the need for private schools to adapt to the national education program. Over to you, Essia.
Thank you, Mariam. The National People's Assembly is taking part in the annual meeting of the Fourth Commission on Specialized Political and Decolonization Issues starting today at the UN headquarters in New York. The Fourth Commission is one of the UN General Assembly's main commissions entrusted with examining issues set on the agenda to be submitted to the General Assembly. The Commission is also entrusted with working out recommendations on draft resolutions to be discussed by the General Assembly. Over to you, Mariam.
We mark today the 1 year of conflict in Gaza that broke out exactly 1 year ago after the Israeli army launched large-scale operations on Gaza that claimed thousands of lives and caused unprecedented damage, considered the most destructive since World War II. On this unfortunate occasion, Radio Algeria International has dedicated its programs to the current situation in Palestinian territories and the escalation of the Israeli aggression in the Middle East. Over to you, Essia.
3 Palestinian civilians were killed and dozens were injured today in an Israeli bombing that targeted citizens' homes in the Nusayrat and Bureij camps in the central Gaza Strip. Local sources said that 3 citizens were killed and others were injured after Israeli warplanes bombed several homes in Block 1 in Bureij camp in the central Gaza Strip. They added that the bombing targeted citizens' homes west of Nusayrat camp in the central Gaza Strip, which resulted in the injury of at least 7 citizens. The occupation forces continue the brutal aggression against the Gaza Strip by land, sea and air since October 7, 2023, which resulted in the killing of 41,870 citizens and the injury of 97,166 others. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and back to you, Mariam.
4 Israeli strikes have hit the southern suburbs of Beirut. The first targeted the St. Therese area and the second targeted the Burj al-Barahne area. Lebanon's national news later reported 2 additional strikes, including one it described as violent.
The European Free Alliance group within the European Parliament has hailed the historic decision taken by the European Union Court of Justice by definitively cancelling the 2 trade agreements concluded between Morocco and the EU, describing the decision as an important victory for the Sahrawi people. They recalled that at European Union Court of Justice hearing, a member of the group stressed that the decision marks the beginning of a new era for the Sahrawi people people and Europe's international relations where justice and respect for human rights must be paramount. The Algerian National Committee of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people, for its part, expressed satisfaction at the rulings of the Court of Justice of the European Union. The Association of Friends of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic also hailed the decision of the Court of Justice of the European Union, describing it as a victory for international law. You solicit Radio Algeria International, and in Tunisia, the candidate Kais Saied has secured 89.2% of the votes in the presidential election, according to opinion polls released by Sigma Conseil and quoted by the news agency TAP. His main contender, Ayeshi Zemal, captured 6.9% of the votes against 3.9% of the votes for Zuhair Marzawi, who ranked third. The same source indicated that the elections were marked by a 27% turnout, stressing that 87.3% of voters estimated at Kais Saied were youth. Back to you, Miriam.
The Palestinian issue is considered as a priority of Algerian foreign policy, especially since the beginning of Algeria's mandate as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. More details in this program, compiled and presented by Asia Bakar.
Since joining the United Nations Security Council in January 2024, Algeria has consolidated its leading role in defending the Palestinian cause. This mandate constitutes a crucial step in Algeria's diplomatic efforts to promote recognition of the rights of the Palestinian people and support their quest for independence. Under the leadership of President Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Palestinian issue has become a priority of Algerian foreign policy, in line with a long tradition of support for Palestine. In just a few months, Algeria achieved significant results, as illustrated by Palestine's admission to the United Nations General Assembly. Although Palestine is not yet a full member, this symbolic recognition represents an important step towards the full recognition of its rights. This success is the result of diplomatic efforts supported by Algeria, which has worked with friendly countries to put pressure on the international community and guarantee Palestine a more active role within the United Nations. This diplomatic victory resonated around the world, and many countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia quickly followed suit, officially recognizing the Palestinian state. Algeria was able to convince several states to support the creation of an independent Palestinian state, thus broadening international support for the Palestinian cause. This movement demonstrates Algeria's growing influence on the global diplomatic scene and its resolute commitment to the Palestinian right to self-determination. President Tebboune's statement on Palestine were crucial in highlighting the injustices suffered by Palestinian people. He stressed that peace would only be possible with the full recognition of the rights of Palestinians, including the right to an independent state with Al-Quds as its capital. His firm positions were welcomed by many Arab and Muslim countries, which consider Algeria as a leader in the defense of just causes and a resolute opponent of foreign interventions. Algerian support for Palestine is not limited to political statements. On a practical level, Algeria has stepped up its humanitarian and economic aid to the Palestinians, ensuring that they are not forgotten in discussions on peace in the Middle East. This concrete aid, combined with active diplomacy, demonstrates Algeria's comprehensive and sincere commitment to the Palestinian cause. President Tebboune took advantage of the Arab League platform to call on the Arab nations not to normalize their relations with a Zionist entity until a just solution to the Palestinian question is found. He warned that any marginalization of Palestine would constitute a betrayal of its people and an obstacle to peace in the region. This clear position strengthens Algeria's credibility with other Arab and Muslim nations, which share its vision of united resistance against international pressure for normalization. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, reiterated that Algeria considers Palestine's independence part of her own independence, and Algeria will keep making efforts at the UN for Palestine's full membership.
بالنسبة لفلسطين، احنا فلسطين استقلالها وقالها قالوها الزعماء الجزائريين رحمهم الله في بداية الاستقلال. قال استقلالنا ما يتم إلا يوم تستقل فلسطين، نعتبر استقلالنا ناقص، وعلى هذا المبدأ ماشيين، وعلى هذا المبدأ نسير حتى نصل إلى دولة فلسطين كاملة الحقوق في حدودها في 1967. الفصائل تشرذم تاع الشعوب، ضعف قوة فلسطين في وحدتها، وشعرين بها الإخوان الفلسطينيين. قبلوا الاجتماع في الجزائر لأن الجزائر مبدئيا لا تستغل أي وحدة. نطلب ونحن نناضل حاليا مع بعض دول أخرى مثل الصين أن تكون عضو في الأمم المتحدة ولو مستعمرة، ولكن عضو كامل في الأمم المتحدة، ما تبقاش ملاحظ في الأمم المتحدة، وهذا إن شاء الله سنصل إليه.
Algeria's mandate as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council coincided with the unfortunate Israeli genocide against Gaza, an act that was condemned and relentlessly pointed at by Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar Benjama, who called for imposing an immediate ceasefire to avoid further escalation in the region.
على المجموعة الدولية
The international community should answer the calls for putting a halt to the killings that target the Palestinians by urging for an immediate ceasefire. Those who oppose or block the ceasefire should reconsider their policy and calculations, because the wrong decisions made today will be reaped as violence and instability tomorrow in our region and the whole world.
عنفاً وعدم استقرار.
Meanwhile, Algeria clearly stated at the UN that the international community is blatantly loose when it comes to the Israeli violation of international law. During the general debate of the UN General Assembly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, shed light on the current multifaceted Israeli escalation, stressing that the international community is not yet firm in the face of Israeli aggression and expansion, which gives the occupation a green light to commit further crimes.
فما يحدث في غزة من حرب إبادة جماعية متواصلة.
The relentless genocide that has been taking place in Gaza for a whole year now, and the expansion of this war to the West Bank lately and Lebanon currently, and what is happening in the whole region due to the Israeli multifaceted and multi-front escalation would not have happened if the international community took a firm position once the aggression started by imposing on the Israeli colonial occupation what was imposed on others in terms of punitive and deterrent measures provided by the 7th chapter of the United Nations Charter. The international community should impose an immediate halt to the nightmare suffered by the Palestinian and the Lebanese peoples, and curb the Israeli occupier's savagery and its will to plunge the Middle East region in a series of crises, conflicts, and permanent and endless wars. The international community is also required to realize that the current situation is a turning point in the history of the Palestinian cause.
من تاريخ القضية الفلسطينية.
Despite the ongoing challenges, including the persistence of the conflict on the ground and the opposition of certain powers, the results of Algerian diplomacy are undeniable. Algeria has been able to rally international support for the Palestinian cause and advance concrete initiatives at the UN while maintaining pressure to ensure that Palestinian rights are respected. Algeria's mandate at the Security Council, which will continue until 2025, offers a valuable opportunity for the country to defend Palestine on the international stage. Through dynamic and committed diplomacy, Algeria is positioning itself as a key player in the fight for justice in the Middle East and a staunch defender of people's rights to self-determination.
Since the beginning of the Israeli genocide on Gaza, protests have been staged all around the world calling for a ceasefire. These protests have exposed the Israeli crimes and shed light on the suffering of the Palestinians. More details in this report, compiled and presented by Jamal Salmani.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Today, the 7th of October, marks 1 year since Israel began its genocidal war on Gaza, destroying virtually everything that made life possible in the Strip. Peoples of the world stood up united and took to the streets in solidarity with the Palestinians. During 365 days, massive demonstrations were staged in cities around the globe, calling for a permanent ceasefire and an end to the Israeli occupation. London, one of the cities where hundreds of thousands marched for Palestine. Radio Algeria International contacted Kamal Hawash, British Palestinian professor at the University of Birmingham and former chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in the UK, who told us more about the protests.
Let me start by saying that the matters didn't start on the 7th of October. Palestinians have been oppressed and occupied since 1948. So people came onto the streets very soon after the 8th of October when they saw what Israel had in a plan for the Palestinian people. And on the first march in London, we had over 100,000 people, probably 200,000. The numbers continued to rise on a weekly basis. There was one protest which became famous for a picture from one of the bridges in London where 1 million people marched. And they marched in support of an immediate ceasefire. And then that developed into also calling for an end of arms sale to Israel. There weren't only the demonstrations in the UK, in the US and other places. Then we had the students on university campuses creating encampments where they were demanding specific things from their own universities that had some investment in Israeli companies or companies complicit with the Israeli occupation. So the importance of both the protests and the encampments was to highlight what is happening in Gaza, to say we reject it, to put pressure on governments to change their position. Unfortunately, for a year now, neither the British government nor the American government have changed their position sufficiently. In the UK, there was a positive change with the new Labour government that they cancelled some licenses for selling arms to Israel, but that wasn't enough. And we are still calling for an end to arms sales to Israel.
The war on Gaza gave birth to a movement of protests led by students at university campuses, but repressive measures have been taken to silence the voices of the students who chanted, "Free, free Palestine." Professor Hawash told Radio Algeria International about the repression endured by the pro-Palestine protesters, particularly the students.
I mean, people are still committed to supporting the Palestinian people. There is no doubt that the actions by police in different countries, particularly in Germany, actually, in Europe, but in the UK as well, is that they've been pressured into associating symbols of Palestinian identity, like the Palestinian flag and the kufiyyah, with what supporters of Israel say makes them uncomfortable. They call them Hamas symbols, etc., which they are not. So yes, there have been attempts to oppress protesters, to limit speech, particularly on university campuses, and to go after those who speak at Palestinian events if there is enough objection by the pro-Israel side to a particular speaker saying something they don't like, such as even from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Yes, there is oppression, but people are still determined to support the Palestinian people because they see it. Even if governments pretend that Israel hasn't done anything wrong, it has been dreadful in the way it has handled the situation and continues to, with 80% of the infrastructure in Gaza destroyed. I'm an academic. Every single university in Gaza has been destroyed, 16 of them. So we see it. We know that what Israel is doing is not self-defense, but unfortunately, Western governments are still not siding with the Palestinians and being on the right side of history. But people will continue, despite the oppression, to continue to protest for the Palestinians until there is an end to this aggression on Palestine and on Lebanon now. That's not going to stop until that happens.
To this day, people continue to organize demonstrations in many cities. notably in Paris, New York, Washington, and elsewhere, to express their solidarity with the Palestinians in the name of humanity.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and in this program, read by Majid Mila, our colleague Mariam Barshi interviewed UNRWA's senior communication manager about the organization and the obstacles hampering its action in the occupied Palestinian territories.
Since the year-long Israeli offensive was launched on Gaza, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Middle East, UNRWA, has been playing a key role in providing humanitarian aid to the besieged Palestinian population. As the conflict has devastated most of Gaza's infrastructure and severely impacted civilians, UNRWA's work has been essential in delivering food, water, medical supplies and shelter to the most vulnerable. However, the agency's operations have been under extreme strain, not only due to the conflict, but also because of the dangers faced by its workers. Radio Algeria International contacted UNRWA's senior communications manager, Jonathan Fowler, who stressed the difficulties faced by the organization in providing aid to the Gaza Strip, notably the difficulty to ensure the safety of aid workers.
Over the course of the past 12 months, Gaza has become a place unfit for humans. Since the war began, families have lived amid destruction, displacement, hunger, disease and fear. UNRWA is doing everything it can to alleviate this absolute humanitarian disaster, but it is extremely difficult. We're not able to get enough aid in due to restrictions, inspections at border crossings, due to the difficulty of getting aid in and distributed across the Gaza Strip, due to insecurity. Security issues are very, very significant in the Gaza Strip. Due to the physical difficulty of moving around within the Gaza Strip, owing to the absolute mountains of rubble and trash, the roads are difficult to pass through. Convoys struggle to get around. And, of course, the issues with deconfliction, where we're unable to guarantee the safety of aid workers. This is hugely problematic.
UNRWA's ability to operate in Gaza has been severely impacted by the deliberate targeting of humanitarian workers and the restrictions imposed by the Israeli occupying authorities. Despite these dangers, the organization has reiterated its commitment to continuing its humanitarian operations in Gaza, though the situation remains precarious. Mr. Fowler emphasized that the death toll in United Nations personnel in the history of the United Nations is unprecedented.
From the very beginning of this war, Gaza became one of the most dangerous places in the world for humanitarian workers. Humanitarians put their lives on the line wherever they work around the world, and Gaza Strip is by far the most egregious example. We, tragically, as UNRWA, have lost 224 of our colleagues killed in the Gaza Strip. Other international organizations have paid the same price. Close to 1,000 medical workers, local medical workers, have also been killed, and tragically also over 100 journalists. Now, it's very difficult for us to say whether individual deaths are the result of deliberate targeting. We do know, however, that our facilities have been targeted. Over 200 of our facilities have been hit. Sadly and tragically, over 560 people sheltering, for example, in UNRWA schools, which have been transformed into emergency shelters for displaced people, have also been hit. These are places which are meant to be protected under the United Nations flag. The death toll is unprecedented for UN personnel in the history of the United Nations.
The financial challenges at UNRWA worsened due to the reduced financial support from donor countries like Canada, Britain, Germany, Italy and the Netherlands, who claimed that UNRWA staff was involved in Hamas's October 7th operations, leading to significant funding cuts.
The decision by a number of our donor countries to suspend or withdraw their financial support from UNRWA earlier this year placed the agency in an absolutely critical situation at precisely the wrong moment, because the demands, we were already not a wealthy agency and we have increasing amounts of work across the region, but when we're dealing with a massive humanitarian crisis, an unprecedented scale in the Gaza Strip, then the amount of financial contributions needed to be increased, not reduced. And we found ourselves in a situation where we were facing the very real prospect of our operations across the region unravelling by the the end of February. Now, fortunately, donors gradually came back, and as a result of this, although the situation is not at all rosy, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, we are now being able to sustain our operations so far this year, but we're still looking at the possibility of a new crisis point at the end of this month.
UNRWA's work in the Gaza Strip continues despite the tremendous obstacles posed by the violence, financial constraints, and the destruction of essential infrastructure by the Israeli occupying authorities.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and thousands of women are facing life-threatening health risk in the Gaza Strip, where more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's genocide. The UN Women body said in a report on Sunday that more than 85% of health facilities have been damaged, disrupting medical services and making it challenging for women to access essential health care. The report also underscored the urgent needs for women, such as cancer treatment, maternal health services, and psychological support. The UN body urged for immediate assistance to address the special health needs of women and girls in Gaza.
The Palestinian Red Crescent Society warned of complete halt to health services at El Amal Hospital in Khan Yunis, south of the Gaza Strip, due to the lack of spare parts and oils for electric generators. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, 27 minutes Algiers time, and back to you, Miriam.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has chaired a meeting of the Council of Ministers devoted to the Finance Bill for 2025 and to presentations relating to several sectors. As we mark today 1 year since the beginning of the Israeli genocide on Gaza, 3 Palestinian citizens have been killed and dozens injured in an Israeli bombing. The European Free Alliance group in the European Parliament has held the historic decision taken by the European Union Court of Justice to definitely cancel 2 trade agreements concluded between Morocco and the EU.
You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and in the second part of our special edition today, and as we mark the 1 year of conflict in Gaza that broke out exactly a year ago after the Israeli occupation launched large-scale operations, our political analyst from California University is shedding light on why ceasefire in Gaza has become mostly impossible.
The international event of the week.
The horrific assault launched 1 year ago by the Israeli against Gaza has so far killed more than 41,500, wounded 96,000 others, and displaced nearly 1.9 million people. The Israeli large-scale operations caused the destruction of 85% of the territory's infrastructure, dismantling systematically Gaza's healthcare system. The Israeli blockade on Gaza has hampered the access to humanitarian aid, leaving a whole population in despair as the Israeli army pursued its pounding of the Palestinian territory. The Israeli occupying authorities, which have tightened their grip on the Palestinian territory, continue to turn a deaf ear to all ceasefire calls. Asked if there were any prospects for a cessation of hostilities in Gaza, our California-based political analyst Hamid Salhi had this to say.
Such a prospect appears slim in the absence of real pressure on Israel, either from the United States or the international community. Medium range, there is a scenario in which hostilities, Israel genocide actions of genocide against the Palestinians could end by the end of this year. This can be supported by a declaration by Israeli officials. Strategists back in May, Israel National Security Advisor described the year 2024 as a year of combat. He dismissed the idea that the war in Gaza would end after the military offensive in Rafah, and predicted or stated specifically that the war will continue, the hostilities against the Palestinians would continue for 7 months, meaning December this year end. A year later of the assault on Gaza, We see that the Israelis have moved on to Lebanon and are about to do what a major American network, a TV network, observed, that a regional war is effectively here. This could get complicated for the Zionist states. One perspective could argue that Israel will be faced with mounting pressure, both internally as a result of mass casualties or internationally, and pressure that would force them to stop these hostilities. Hence, those who, according to the National Security Advisor, it is the end of this year is one scenario. A related reason why this could be possible is that with the American election out of the way, the United States current administration, if the Democrats were to keep the White House, will want to end this war to give the upcoming president a clean start. This is very likely. President Biden could see this as part of his legacy. He could do or take action against Israel, making the case to the public as someone who has proven to be a strong ally of the Jewish state, and by also presenting a huge commitment to Israel, strengthening its security and making it a key post of U.S. interest in the Middle East. But much of this depend, it could be shorter or longer, much depend on the resistance. The Palestinians have proven resilient. And also another factor that could play is that if Donald Trump were to win the elections, the current administration may not do anything and let the